September 19th, 1944, 7:30 in the morning. A thick blanket of fog rolled across the fields near Arracourt in eastern France, reducing visibility to less than 100 yards. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams sat in the turret of his Sherman tank, call sign Thunderbolt, scanning the gray wall of mist ahead. Somewhere out there, German Panzers were advancing. His tankers could hear them before they could see them, the distinctive rumble of heavy engines growing louder through the haze. The ground trembled beneath the tracks of machines that outweighed and outgunned everything the Americans had. When the first dark shapes materialized from the fog, the American gunners opened fire. At ranges so close they could have thrown a baseball at the enemy, 75mm shells slammed into the flanks of Panthers that had stumbled blindly into American guns. Steel sparked against steel, ammunition detonated inside enemy turrets. 11 German tanks burned that morning, their crews dying in machines that were supposed to be invincible. The vaunted technological superiority of German armor meant nothing when the enemy could not see you until you were already behind them. This was the moment when American tankers proved that tactics, training, and terrain could defeat supposedly invincible machines. Not through suicidal charges, not through overwhelming numbers alone, but through disciplined maneuver, combined arms coordination, and the hard-won wisdom purchased in blood from North Africa to Normandy. But to understand how American tankers developed these tactics, we must first understand the terrifying mathematics they faced when German heavy armor appeared on the battlefield. We must understand what it felt like to look through a periscope and see a Tiger tank for the first time, knowing that your gun could not hurt it and its gun could not miss you. The Tiger. I was a monster built for a single purpose, destroying enemy tanks from ranges where they could not fight back. Weighing 57 tons, it carried 100mm of hardened steel on its front hull and turret. The upper hull sides and turret sides were protected by 80mm of armor, though the lower hull sides were only 60mm. The armor was mounted almost vertically, relying on sheer thickness rather than slope to defeat incoming rounds. British testing on a captured Tiger in late 1943 revealed that this German steel was approximately 13% more resistant than equivalent British plate, making the protection even greater than the raw numbers suggested. A Tiger's frontal armor could stop virtually anything the Allies could throw at it in 1943, and remained formidable through the end of the war. The Tiger's main weapon was the fearsome 88mm KWK-36 gun. Firing standard armor-piercing ammunition, the 88 could penetrate 132mm of steel at 100 meters and still punch through 99mm at 1,000 meters. The gun's accuracy was extraordinary. German tankers claimed kills at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. The recoil mechanism absorbed the tremendous forces so smoothly that the gunner could track his fall of shot and correct without losing the target. Against a Sherman's frontal armor, roughly 90 to 100mm of effective protection when slope was considered, the Tiger could achieve a killing hit at 1,500 to 2,000 meters or beyond. At those ranges, the Sherman appeared through German gun sights as barely more than a dot. Yet the 88 could reach out and destroy it with a single round. The shell would punch through the frontal plate, ricochet around the interior, and kill or maim everyone inside. The crew would have no warning, no chance to respond. One moment they were scanning for threats. The next moment they were dead. The arithmetic was brutal and simple. A Tiger crew could sit comfortably at 1,500 meters and methodically destroy every Sherman that appeared, knowing that nothing those Shermans carried could hurt them. The American tankers had no offensive option in a frontal engagement. Their choices were to retreat, call for help, or somehow maneuver around the enemy to hit the thinner side and rear armor that their guns could actually penetrate. Retreat meant abandoning infantry, losing ground, and inviting pursuit. Calling for help took time that dying men did not have. Maneuver was the only real option, and it required exposing your tank to fire while crossing open ground. A Sherman crew facing a Tiger frontally was not in a tank battle. They were in an execution. The only hope was to get around the enemy, to strike the flanks where their guns might actually work. The standard Sherman carried the 75mm M3 gun, a weapon originally designed for infantry support rather than tank killing. The Army had prioritized a gun that could fire effective high-explosive rounds against fortifications, machine gun nests, and troop concentrations. Armor-piercing capability was secondary. Firing its best armor-piercing round, it could penetrate only 61mm at 500 yards when striking armor angled at 30 degrees. Against the Tiger's frontal armor of 100mm, this gun was completely useless at any range. The shell would strike the German steel and shatter, leaving nothing but a silver splash of metal and a furious enemy crew, now fully aware of your position. To have any chance of penetrating a Tiger's flank, a Sherman crew had to close to distances where the German gunner could not possibly miss. And during that approach, the Tiger's 88 could fire 6 to 8 aim shots per minute. A Tiger crew could engage and destroy several Shermans before any of them reached killing range. The 76mm M1 gun began reaching American units in France during Operation Cobra in July of 1944. This weapon offered significant improvement, penetrating 93mm at 500 yards. It could threaten Tiger side armor at moderate ranges, but remained inadequate against the front, except at suicidally close distance. When Eisenhower learned that even the 76mm could not reliably penetrate Panther frontal armor, he was furious. "Why is it that I am always the last person to hear about this stuff?" he demanded. "Ordnance told me this 76 would take care of anything the Germans had." The Supreme Commander had been misinformed. His tankers were paying for that misinformation with their lives. The real solution was a special round called HVAP, high-velocity armor piercing, which used a dense tungsten carbide core to achieve extraordinary velocity and penetration. This ammunition could punch through 157mm at 500 yards. HVAP could defeat a Tiger frontally at roughly 1,500 yards, nearly equalizing the engagement. But tungsten was desperately scarce. Most Sherman crews were lucky to carry 2 to 5 HVAP rounds if they received any at all. Many received none. Tank commanders hoarded these precious shells, saving them for emergencies, never knowing if the next engagement would be the one where they desperately needed tungsten to survive. The British developed their own solution in the Sherman Firefly, mounting the powerful 17-pounder gun in a standard Sherman hull. This weapon could penetrate approximately 130 to 140mm at 500 yards, enabling frontal kills on Tigers at 1,700 to 1,900 yards. But the conversion was recognizable by its longer barrel, and the Germans learned to target Fireflies first. American forces did not employ the Firefly, relying instead on tank destroyers and the scarce HVAP rounds. American doctrine under Field Manual 17-10 envisioned medium tanks primarily as exploitation and breakthrough forces targeting rear area installations. Anti-armor operations were formally assigned to specialized tank destroyer battalions. This did not mean tanks were prohibited from engaging enemy armor when necessary. Doctrine anticipated such engagements and provided guidance. The practical difference was one of mission emphasis rather than absolute prohibition. The tank destroyer branch represented the Army's formal anti-armor philosophy. The M10 Wolverine mounted the 3-inch gun on an open-top turret, sacrificing crew protection for reduced weight and improved gun depression. The M18 Hellcat was the fastest tracked armored fighting vehicle of the war, capable of 55 miles per hour on roads. The M36 Jackson carried the 90mm gun, the weapon that could finally match the Tiger on something approaching equal terms. American tankers called it the can opener for good reason. When employed in their intended role, tank destroyer units achieved remarkable results. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion claimed 39 kills for 4 losses at Arracourt. The 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion destroyed approximately 40 German tanks total during the Bastogne siege, with its most intense single day of combat coming on Christmas Day. The real tactical evolution occurred at the platoon level. Developed by sergeants and lieutenants learning through trial and terror what worked against German heavy armor, the standard American tank platoon consisted of 5 Shermans operating as a coordinated unit. When engaging superior German armor, these crews developed a tactical method that was often described as swarming, but was more accurately understood as coordinated fire and maneuver. The core principle was straightforward in concept and harrowing in execution. One section of 2 to 3 tanks would engage the enemy frontally to fix it in place and draw fire. These tanks would use terrain for cover where possible, exposing only their turrets while keeping their hulls behind rises or in depressions. They would fire rapidly, not necessarily expecting to penetrate, but forcing the enemy gunner to respond to an immediate threat. Every second the German spent engaging these tanks was a second he was not looking for the flanking element. Meanwhile, the other section maneuvered to the flank or rear to engage thinner armor. These tanks had to move fast across open ground, accepting the risk of exposure to reach positions where their guns could actually kill. The maneuver might take them through fields, between buildings, into wood lines, anywhere that terrain offered a covered approach to the enemy's vulnerable sides. Flanking was not a tactical preference for American tankers. It was a survival imperative born of desperation and necessity. White phosphorus smoke proved one of the most tactically decisive tools American tankers possessed. When faced with heavy German armor that could not be penetrated frontally, crews would fire smoke rounds to completely obscure the enemy's line of sight. Blinded, the Tiger crew knew that American tanks were maneuvering in that smoke, getting into positions where their guns would work. Discretion was often the better part of valor. 2 smoke rounds followed by armor-piercing projectiles were often enough to force a Tiger to withdraw. This was actually one reason some commanders resisted the 76mm gun. It lacked a white phosphorus round, sacrificing this invaluable capability for improved armor-piercing performance that still could not reliably defeat German heavy armor frontally. In some situations, the 75mm smoke capability was worth more than the 76mm modest penetration improvement. Terrain exploitation proved equally critical. A Tiger that could kill at 2,000 meters was no more effective than a Sherman at 500 meters when both tanks opened fire simultaneously at 500 meters. American crews learned to use every fold of ground, every building, every woodline and hedgerow to deny German armor its range advantage. In the Normandy bocage country, dense hedgerows created a nightmare for armored operations. Tanks climbing over these hedgerows exposed their thin belly armor to enemy fire and often stalled at the crest, presenting perfect targets. Sergeant Curtis Cullen devised a solution by welding steel teeth cut from German beach obstacles to the front of his Sherman. This Rhino device allowed tanks to burst through hedgerows at speed rather than climbing over them. Around 500 sets were manufactured and fitted to American tanks before the breakout from Normandy. General Omar Bradley called it the best new idea of the war. Combined arms integration matured throughout the campaign. A coordinated engagement against heavy armor could involve field artillery suppressing known positions, mortar or tank smoke masking the approach, P-47 Thunderbolts attacking from above with bombs and rockets, infantry identifying hidden positions and protecting tanks from close-range Panzerfaust teams, and M-36 tank destroyers providing the penetrating firepower Shermans lacked. No element was decisive alone. Together, they created a system that could overwhelm any defense. The Battle of Arracourt from September 18th to the 29th of 1944 stands as the largest American tank engagement on the Western Front before the Battle of the Bulge, and the clearest demonstration that superior tactics, training, and combined arms coordination could overcome German technological advantages. A critical clarification is necessary for historical accuracy. The German force at Arracourt consisted primarily of Panthers and Panzer IVs, not Tigers. The 5th Panzer Army entered battle with 262 armored vehicles, 75 Panzer IVs, 107 Panthers, and 80 assault guns. The American force was the 4th Armored Division's Combat Command A under Colonel Bruce Clark, with Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams and his 37th Tank Battalion as its armored corps. They fielded 75mm Shermans, vehicles grossly outmatched on paper by Panthers, with their long 75mm gun and 80mm of sloped frontal armor, giving effective protection exceeding 120mm. What unfolded was a masterclass in tactical adaptation. Heavy morning fog on September 19th reduced engagement ranges to hundreds of meters, completely negating the Panthers' superior long-range gunnery. Combat Command A tanks occupied concealed positions on local terrain elevations and waited in the mist. When the 111th Panzer Brigade's Panthers advanced blindly without adequate reconnaissance, assuming they faced scattered American rear echelon units, they exposed their flanks to waiting Shermans positioned in a semicircle of ambush. American crews destroyed 11 Panthers on that first day of fighting. The Germans, shocked by the ferocity of resistance, regrouped and attacked again. The pattern repeated across 11 days. German armor attacked. Fog and terrain neutralized their advantages. Disciplined American fire and maneuver tactics inflicted devastating losses. When weather cleared, P-47s from the 19th Tactical Air Command added devastating close air support, their 500-pound bombs and rockets turning German tanks into burning hulks. The German crews were fresh from training depots. The 113th Panzer Brigade, formed on September 4th, just 14 days before the battle began, was essentially untested. Many of its tank commanders had never fought in combat. Many of its drivers had only weeks of experience with their vehicles. They advanced according to textbook tactics that assumed competent reconnaissance and coordinated support. They found instead a veteran American division that had been fighting since the beaches of Normandy. The 4th Armored Division had crossed France in a series of lightning advances, fighting dozens of engagements against German rear guards. Its crews knew their vehicles intimately. Its commanders had developed intuitive understanding of terrain and timing. Crew quality proved more decisive than vehicle quality. By battle's end, Germany had lost approximately 86 tanks destroyed and 114 more damaged or broken down out of 262, leaving just 62 operational. The 5th Panzer Army's offensive capability was shattered. The 4th Armored Division lost 25 tanks and 7 tank destroyers from Combat Command A. The exchange ratio favored the Americans by nearly 3-1 in a battle where the Germans held every technological advantage on paper. The psychological phenomenon known as tiger phobia is well documented in Allied military records. Reports from North Africa through Northwest Europe consistently note that the mere rumor of tigers was often enough to spread panic. Soviet sources record T-34 units withdrawing from areas on mere suspicion of tiger presence. Allied commanders prohibited soldiers from inspecting Shermans destroyed by 88mm hits because the crews were invariably badly mangled. German propaganda amplified the effect, publishing kill tallies for aces like Wittmann and describing tigers as wonder weapons that would turn the tide of war. But the fear was wildly disproportionate to the actual threat frequency. Tigers represented only about 2.7% of total German tank production. Germany built 1,347 Tiger Is and 492 Tiger IIs out of roughly 50,000 armored fighting vehicles. The Panzer IV was the tank American crews actually encountered most often, with over 8,000 built as tanks. It was dangerous but not invincible. Its 75mm gun could kill a Sherman, but a Sherman could kill it in return. A casualty survey of American tank losses in the European theater found that 75mm guns accounted for roughly 36% of gunfire losses against Shermans. This indicates that the most common threats came from Panzer IVs and Stu G3s firing 75mm rounds, not 88mm armed Tigers. The famous claim that it took 5 Shermans to kill 1 Tiger reveals more about organization than combat. As historian Stephen Zaloga explained, American tank platoons always operated with 5 tanks as a unit. That was the minimum tactical element deployed. You were not going to say, "It's only a Sturmgeschütz. Hey Joe, we don't need you and your buddy." The 5-to-1 ratio reflected standard platoon strength, not a required kill equation. Mechanical reliability separated the Sherman from every German heavy tank. Panther operational readiness rates averaged around 50 to 55% over 1944, meaning roughly half of Panthers were broken down at any given time. Tiger readiness rates averaged around 45 to 55% during most periods. The Sherman's readiness rate was approximately 85 to 90%. In Sicily, of 17 Tiger Is deployed, 16 were self-destroyed or abandoned by their own crews. Not a single one was destroyed in combat. They killed themselves through mechanical failure and the impossibility of recovery. Crew survivability in the Sherman was the highest of any Allied tank. Spring-loaded hatches enabled rapid escape, and on average only 1 of 5 crewmen was killed per knocked-out tank. A destroyed Sherman meant 4 survivors who could man a replacement tank, bringing their hard-won experience to the new vehicle. The switch from dry to wet ammunition stowage dramatically reduced the dreaded brewing up, where Shermans exploded in flames after a penetrating hit. Dry stowage. Shermans burned after penetrating hits roughly 60 to 80% of the time. Wet stowage variants, with ammunition surrounded by a water-glycerin mixture that suppressed ignition, burned only 10 to 15% of the time. Experienced crews survived to fight again. Production volume was the ultimate strategic advantage. The United States built 49,234 Shermans. Germany built 1,347 Tiger Is. Every Tiger lost was functionally irreplaceable by late 1944. Every Sherman lost could be replaced overnight from vast depot stocks. The 3rd Armored Division entered Normandy with 232 Shermans. The division suffered 648 completely destroyed, plus 700 more knocked out and repaired, a cumulative loss rate exceeding 500%. Yet the division never stopped fighting. That industrial capacity was as much a weapon system as any gun or armor plate. By April of 1945, Germany fielded approximately 90 tanks of all types on the entire Western Front. Panthers, Panzer IVs, and Tigers combined against 11,000 American tanks and tank destroyers. The ratio was over 100-to-1 in Allied favor. The popular narrative of waves of Shermans swarming helpless Tigers through sheer numbers misses the essential truth. American forces almost never fought. Tiger is in the first place. The flanking tactics that became central to American armored doctrine were developed and employed primarily against Panthers and Panzer IVs. The Sherman was not a death trap, but the most survivable Allied tank backed by logistics and combined arms integration that no enemy could match. The true history is more compelling than the myth. It is the story of an army that entered its first major armored engagement at Kasserine Pass in parade ground formation and was routed, then won its first clear victory at El Guitar just weeks later. It is the story of crews who discovered that white phosphorus smoke could defeat tanks. Their armor-piercing shells could not penetrate. It is the story of Arracourt, where 75mm Shermans defeated Panthers technologically superior in every dimension through fog exploitation, terrain mastery, and veteran tactical judgment. The men who fought in Shermans did not choose their equipment. They fought with what they were given against enemies who often outmatched them in firepower and protection. They won through discipline, teamwork, and tactical innovation developed under fire. They won because they adapted faster than their enemies and learned from every engagement. Every Sherman crew that maneuvered around a Panther to hit its flank was executing a solution paid for in blood. The flanking tactics that let Shermans destroy heavy armor from the side represent one of the most important tactical innovations of the war. These techniques did not come from training manuals. They came from men who learned what worked by watching their friends die when other methods failed. The Tiger was the best tank in any individual engagement. The Sherman was part of the best army in the war. One measure determined victory in battle. The other determined victory in war. That distinction decided everything. If this investigation gave you something to think about, hit the like button. It helps this channel reach the viewers who care about getting the history right. Not the history that flatters us, and not the history that flattens us, but the history that actually happened, with the tactics, the numbers, and the inconvenient truths intact. Subscribe to World War Declassified for new videos every week. Thank you for watching.